I've been seeing more and more runners with a goal of completing their first ultramarathon, and since many of you have been reaching out to me on Facebook asking for suggestions, I figured that I'd make a series of videos dedicated to boosting your confidence, to giving you some info on what you need to complete your first ultramarathon. And I figured the best way that I could do that would be to walk you guys through my first year of ultramarathon training and pretty much explain to you how I went from not running at all to running a 100-miler within 9 months. While I'm by no means a professional, far from it, I've been taking my training seriously for about the last 2.5 years, so I'm close enough to that first year where a lot of the thoughts, the feelings, the emotions, they're still present. So I think this gives me a fresh perspective, and I think this will help me bring you better tips than the generic pace yourself or hydrate often. So again, for this video, I'm gonna bring you my experience of not running at all to running a 100-miler within 9 months. And during this journey, I'm gonna give tips, tricks, and things that I learned along the way right up until that 100-miler. But also be prepared to blaze your own path and learn your own lessons, because that's half the fun of these ultramarathons, is going out there, experiencing it blind, getting beat up, and bringing home a lesson from it. Essentially, I'm hoping this video gives you a baseline for your expectations and really shows you that the main limiting factor in completing an ultra is your mind. If a guy that works a 9-to-5 boring desk job can complete an ultramarathon, then you can too. I'm gonna give you an extremely abridged version of my background starting from when I was a teenager until now. I may expand upon this in a later video, or you can check out one of the podcasts I've been on. I'll go link that in the video description below. The purpose of giving my background isn't just to set expectations, it's also to introduce you to my first lesson, so my rambling will be worth something. So I'm Mike, I'm 35. I started running ultras when I was about 32. I've always been decent at sports. I started working out when I was about 13, although I never considered myself a runner. Now, there were times where I tried to get into running. I tried to really put those miles in. This was primarily before college. I really wanted to be a Navy SEAL. I think I probably put in maybe 15 to 20 miles on a peak week. A large part of my 20s was spent putting on weight and abusing alcohol to cope with stress. I did very little sports or anything athletic for that matter, and I was working a job that I was miserable in, having a body that both looked and felt terrible. Now, by the end of my 20s, I decided to make a change. I got into jiu-jitsu, I got into Muay Thai, yoga, and I started viewing these challenges as ways to better myself and improve myself. Essentially, up until the time I was 32, I had an extremely average endurance background. What's important was, right at this point, I had learned to use challenges as motivation, and I wanted to do new, different, harder things in order to better myself. Now, at 32, I decided to take up cycling as a way to further challenge myself, get some endurance, and most importantly, just go out and explore the world. Long story short, I was on a 240-mile bikepacking trip across Florida, and I decided to download a whole bunch of audiobooks on ultra-endurance sports, and a couple of these were on ultramarathons. During this trip, I became hooked on the idea of running these distances instead of bicycling them, and the day after I got done with my 240-mile bikepacking trip was the first day I started my ultramarathon training. My first piece of advice that I mentioned in the intro, and one that I really learned on this bikepacking trip, is that your mind is the major limiting factor in almost everything in life, and that goes double for endurance sports. At the beginning of this trip, the thought of running across Florida was almost laughable, and by the end of it, I was thinking, why couldn't I? About 18 months later, I completed a 200-mile foot race across Florida, and while this video is only focused on the first 9 months to a year of my ultramarathon running, I wanted to bring this up to really drive home the point that we should be asking, how can I accomplish this? Not why am I doing this, or is this even possible? So back to my first year. I had no plan this first year except that I wanted to run my first 100-miler about 18 months after I started ultramarathon training. Everything else was just learn as I went, and I'm not gonna go into detail of every single race I did, but I signed up for some incredibly tough events that I had a lot of doubts that I would even be able to finish. My first race was 4 months after I started running seriously, and that was the Vero Beach Octopus 50-miler. I signed up for the 50K, but then shortly after that, I completed a 22-mile training run, so I knew for a fact I can get a 50K done. But I wasn't sure if I'd get a 50-mile done, and that really excited me. Fast forward to the race, I hit that 50K mark, and I felt like I got the shit kicked out of me. I couldn't imagine going any farther, but I decided to at least DNF while I was out on the course as opposed to sitting at the aid station and throwing the towel in there. I was seriously cursing myself the entire time, the last 20 miles, but what happened was, as I got closer and closer to that 35, 40, 45 mile mark, I realized that the miles were ticking down. I was 15, 10, 5 miles away. I couldn't believe that I was actually gonna accomplish this 50-miler. I got done with the 50-miler, I felt even worse than I imagined I could feel at the 50K mark, but I felt so good that I pushed myself, and I felt so good that I had overreached and signed up for the event that I wasn't sure if I could accomplish. If I had only signed up for the 50K, I don't think I would have ever truly known my limits or lack of limits that I was capable of. So my next piece of advice that I'm going to give you is do not be afraid to fail. Sign up for a tough event and risk a DNF. You have absolutely nothing to lose and everything to gain, and chances are you're going to find out that you're capable of way more than you thought you were. I feel like in today's society, there's a big stigma on using the term fail and, accepting that we failed at something. I'll tell you right now, I've learned more from my failures than I have in almost any of my victories. Failure isn't just not finishing a race. A failure can be not finishing a race within a certain goal time that you had. So if we're taking that definition, I've failed almost all of my races, but in each of those races, I've learned something about pacing, nutrition. I've taken something away from that, and I use that toward my next race, and I get closer and closer to my goal of succeeding. After that 50 mile was complete, I was absolutely hooked, and I happened to sign up for the long haul 100, which was about 5 months away. So my 18-month goal of running a 100 miler just got sliced in half and became a 9-month goal, partially out of convenience of the long haul 100 being an incredible race, but partially because I had a bit of an ego built up from that 50 miler. I signed up for a few more ultra distance races over the next few months in order to test myself and boost my training. And while I did in fact test myself, I found out something much more important. With each race, I was learning an immense amount of information. Nutrition, pacing, strategy, physical changes to my body in different temperatures. Each race was a learning experience where I would learn what not to do just as much as what to do. So my next suggestion would be to sign up for as many races as you can prior to your goal race. Going on long runs can be vital to building up your physical endurance, building up your mental endurance, but being in a race with the clock ticking next to other runners with their own wealth of knowledge and information was vital to my success in building up to these longer distances. Now, races can be quite expensive, especially if you do a bunch of them, but go to Ultra Sign Up, go to Run Sign Up, and chances are that you're going to find some pretty cheap trail races that are probably pretty close to you. Also, if you search on Facebook, you can probably find some local running groups that put on these fat ass events. A fat ass event is pretty much a group of other crazy runners get together, they bring their own supplies, and they go do either loops or some kind of course, and they run an ultra together. These cost $0. You meet a bunch of incredible people. These are the people that are in it for more than just the medal. These are the people that are in it because they love the community, they love running, and these are some of the best people you can meet out there. Okay, back to it. Finally, in December, about 8 months after I started my ultra marathon training and 1 month before my first 100 miler, I had a 100K trail race that I was going to take part in. This race, the St. Lucie Skeeter Scoot 100K, had a similar course composition and aid station layout as what I would see at Long Haul 100. So this ended up being the perfect last training run before I took on my 100 miler. So my next tip would be to schedule a long run or a race such as this about 6 to 8 weeks out from your goal race with the intention of dialing in every aspect of your game plan. Wear the exact same socks, eat the exact same food, use the exact gels, carry the exact same weight of gear. Do everything on this last training run or race that you would do on your race day. This is not only to build your confidence and give you an idea of what race day is going to be like, but this is your chance to find any snags in that game plan and make adjustments before you actually go into your race and face issues on the day of. I can tell you, you can plan everything out, you can test all your gear, something is going to go wrong on a race day. It may be minor, it may be major. Do what you can prior to race day to minimize anything that can go wrong, because something's probably going to go wrong. Okay, so now here we are, the day of the Long Haul 100, 9 months after I started training, and I'm ready to go out and try to get my first buckle. And the Long Haul 100 ended up being awesome. I had a great time. The weather was perfect. The course was perfect. Aid stations real close together. In fact, I think I might have over-prepared for this race and really built it up in my head. All the training I did, all those really tough races I did leading up to it. I finished this race and I felt kind of empty. I didn't overcome any great physical or mental obstacles. I didn't face any adversity. Toward the end of the race, I didn't push particularly hard. So I just went out there, knocked out miles, and got it done. And that brings me to my final talking point, which is to temper your expectations. You will face a range of emotion after you complete an ultramarathon, whether it be your first or your 10th, and these emotions can range from elation to indifference. Quite possibly, you're gonna face every emotion between the two spectrums. I was proud of myself and relieved that I got my first buckle, don't get me wrong, but I was left feeling and thinking, what's next? I'm gonna touch on this topic in a different video, but after a race, more often than not, I feel quite depressed and I start planning that next adventure right away, like the day after. I cope with feelings of insignificance and fear of wasting my life, so I use running, racing, making these videos as a way to challenge myself and kind of as a way to make my mark and do something positive. There's no telling how you're gonna feel after a race, but be prepared to wanna take on that next challenge, or maybe take some time off of running, or maybe you're a normal person and can just feel happy and content. That's all up to you. Now, one final note and piece of advice. This is something that I think about a lot and really helps me out in my races, in my day-to-day life, and everything. That's that we are all an experiment of one. Your journey can and will be much different than mine, and your path may take you far from the one that I traveled. Don't listen to the people that doubt your abilities or tell you that you're doing something the wrong way. They're either jealous that you have the drive to achieve something incredible, or they don't realize that our minds are the biggest limiting factor in achieving greatness. Set your own goal, plan your own adventure, blaze your own damn path, because you're an amazing person and you're capable of anything. Thanks for being here with me. I look forward to making more videos on ultramarathon training and ultramarathon mentality. So if you like this video, please consider giving it a like, give it a share, and if you're not subscribed, do so. If you don't want to do that, then it's all good. I'm just happy you're here with me. Thanks again, everyone. Now let's get out there and do something amazing.